Sweet. Is it recording? How do I know?
It says recording, like in the top left corner.
Okay, great. All right. Anything else that you want to share?
The like famous quote is that when the person asked her to get up, she said no.
Okay, great. So, raise your right hand, everybody. Look at the camera. Say I, state your name. You're saying it right, even though you're muted. Okay, cool. I state your name. Promise not to cheat. While we're learning about Rosa, I will keep my fingers off of Google.
I keep my fingers off of Google.
No cheating. For real. We're going to learn stuff together. This is what we call our collective knowledge. This is what we know. This is our prior knowledge. You came to know this information somehow, somewhere, some way. And together, this is kind of a snapshot of what we know. You can do this with any historical topic that you think students know a little bit about, but need to have a further understanding of. And clearly, please don't be offended. We have a lot to learn about this story, which is totally normal and good. And so that's good. So this is what we know about Rosa. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split you up into groups. And I am going to give you some historical documents from this period of time. Okay. We're going to be able to come back to this collection of knowledge and we're going to hack it up and edit it and fix it. And that's going to be our polka dot brain moment. Remember that, Kumashiro, when he goes into the school and he takes his partial knowledge and the school gives their partial knowledge and they work on some stuff together and he comes out changed? That's the goal for today. So what you're going to do, instead of me telling you what historical thinking is first, we're going to experience it. We're going to go through it and see what it feels like as a learner to do that. And then you're going to come back and we'll debrief it and we'll talk about what historical thinking is. We are using this framework, this idea of historical thinking to push us toward that final project that we have in this class, because it's week 5, y'all. I know. We have the Journey Box project coming up. And so between now and next week, you're going to read the assignment description of the Journey Box. But right now we're experiencing it together, okay, as co-constructed. We're practicing co-constructivism. So we're co-constructing our knowledge together today about this particular topic. Be thinking about what interests you. And we're going to get back to Kaki. I know we did some citizenship articles last time for our jigsaws later today. But be thinking back to Takaki. We're going to start working our way through that book. And again, that's a U.S. history text. And so be thinking about what in U.S. history that Takaki might be able to help us out with might interest you enough to create a project on a historical topic or person or event. So what we're doing today, we're investigating Rosa Parks and that story of when she said no, and when she got arrested and the boycott that followed. And so you could think about that as a Journey Box topic. And so see what we do and see what sources we use and how we unravel the story and then sort of put it back together. So, and I'm doing things opposite than I wanted to today. So give me just a second. I just sometimes change my mind. But I'm going to put you in breakout groups. And what I need you to do now, if you can you get on As You Learn to see the documents that we're going to be accessing today? I tried sending some in the chat before and multiple people have various problems with that, being able to open files that are shared in chat. And so I thought it might be best to just upload everything in As You Learn. So if you could locate those files and find a way, if they're in a folder for week 5 and 6, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 documents. And so I'm going to put you in 9 breakout groups. And so each group is going to get a different document, but you need to be able to access all of them because we're going to be looking at them together today. Do you have any questions before I break you up into those groups? I know I haven't told you what you're doing yet, but questions so far? Okay, so when you get in your group, you're going to be assigned a document, and you and your partners are going to look at it, and you're going to do a historical analysis, okay? And without too much information, basically you're looking at the document and telling me what it is. What is it? What is it telling you? How is it a part of this story, okay? The other thing that I want you to do is I want you to generate a list of questions that you have that are not answered by looking at that document. So you could return to, and I put the link to the Prezi in As You Learn also. You could return to our list that we have of our who, what, when, where, how, and you could look at your document and say, this answers the who question, but it doesn't answer the how. And so our how question is, so generate a list of questions that you have that you need in order to get at these inquiries that we have based on what little knowledge we truly know about this topic. What questions do you have before I break you up? Okay. All right, please accept this invitation and I will join you in your small group, or no, yes. What's the best way to tell you? Let's do it like this. Samaria, you're funny. Let's do it like this. We'll do group 1. That's going to be Libby, Jennifer, and Samaria. You're going to have the arrest. So these are named documents. Breakout room 2, you're going to have the bus seating. Breakout room 3, you're going to have the bus diagram. Breakout room, and that's going to be Abby, Kelsey, and Taylor. Breakout room 4, Megan B, Samantha Hopkins, and Valerie. 4 is going to have fingerprints. Group 5 is Brooke and Sarah Rears. Brooke Rollins and Sarah Rears, and y'all are going to have the flyer. Ooh, that's a good one. Group 6, Jessica and Megan Clotworthy. You're going to have the MLK Holt Street Baptist Church. Some of these are just images. And then 7, group 7, you're going to have the police report. Group 8, group 7 is Callie and Megan Hagler. Group 8 is Kelly Wooten and Samantha Sweet. And y'all will have the walking to image. And the last group, Addison and Marcy, you have the one that's just called walking. Enjoy, have fun. 5 minutes. That's all you need, 5 minutes, and we'll come back. Ooh, that's a terrible image. Hi, are we all back? Is this everybody? Okay, cool. All right, let's fill in some knowledge. Who had this one?
Group 2 had that one. And one thing that we talked about is how there are definitely like open seats available in between people. Yet there's still a Black man standing up and a young child as well, who's also Black. And then Jane and Sam pointed this out. I didn't really even think about it. Is that in the back, it seems that the Black people are fitting 2 per seat, and in the front, the white people each are sitting in their own seat.
Good. You made some great observations there. And so one thing, yes, this is really hard to see. I'm sorry for the poor quality. Right here, where my mouse is circling, there's a sign, and it says white. And so that sign, from that sign forward, that part of the bus, hands up if you've been on the Apple Cart before. Okay, so y'all know what a bus looks like. It's about the same size, right? So from there, think about that as like the second set of doors. So you know the bus has the doors at the front, and then they have the doors at the back. Well, back in the day, you paid with coin change money to come and ride your bus, right? So you would come in the front door, you'd put your change in, and you'd go sit down. However, if you were a person of color, you would come in the front door, put your money in, and then you had to exit the front door. You had to walk the length of the bus to door number 2 and get in the back door, because that was the quote unquote colored section. Y'all follow me? That's a jacked up law. It was not just common practice. It was the law on the books. And what you could get arrested for was not following the instructions of your bus driver. So we're going to look at the police report here in a second. But that's how it went.
I want to point out one thing on the picture is if you look to the right of the picture, you see the white woman with black hair. Behind her, there's a seat that's empty.
Yes.
And then there's a white man. So instead of like even being somewhat nice and like filing in like, okay, white person, you take the very first seat and go back. And that way, like Black people can file up forward.
Yeah.
You know, like still like behind the white people, but
right.
Like they're literally making them stand up. Like there are seats that no one is in.
Yes, correct. And someone said it looks like folks in the back, they're sitting more to a seat. Absolutely. And not just that, there's a man standing. Why do you think he's standing?
Because there are no seats.
There are no more seats back there. That's right. There are no more seats back there for colored folks. It doesn't matter that we have empty seats in the white section. Okay. Now, there was a rule that if there were no white people in the front section, 0, not 1, Black people could sit there. Okay. But the minute a white person got on that bus, you better get up. So this was the case. I want you to think about Rosa here in a minute. Who had this diagram? That needs to go away. The bus diagram. This helps us to contextualize.
We had that one.
Okay, tell me what you thought about this.
Yeah, so we were kind of just like trying to figure out the basic stuff, and that was kind of like that the top is the front of the bus and the X is kind of, you know, where the driver sits and the doors. And so we were just trying to figure out kind of which way it went.
Yeah.
And then right there where it says where Rosa was, I guess that's where she was sitting when the
right here. Yes, the X is the bus driver here. This little perforated triangle, that's the front door. This is where the money would have gone in the little change machine that stood on a pole. And then you would come back here and you would enter through the back door here. This represents the colored section, and these are representative of one person per little circle there. So you can see that there were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I don't know if these two were white or not white, but about 12 seats, okay, for people of color. The rest of the bus was available for your white patrons, okay? And so that way I was telling you about paying your money and then leaving. That way you didn't even have to walk past a white person, right? So segregation was a real thing. You also see that this says Exhibit C, and you can't see the date on there. I believe it's February of 1956. This was used in Rosa's case against the city of Montgomery. And so we'll look at that here in a second. Who had the fingerprints? Could we tell anything from this? Oh, it's hard to
My
tell.
group had it. It was like really hard to read though because it's just really blurry.
Yeah.
But we could tell that Rose's signature is on the bottom. But other than that, like we couldn't read any of the other ones. But we kind of came up with the conclusion that this might have been after she was arrested,
Mhm.
and so they fingerprinted her.
It is. And what you see here, if we could really see it. Sorry, I have multiple versions of these based on this very issue. You think I would have a know which copy was good. Anyway, her fingerprints, what it says there is the date basically. And so that's something that we're pulling from here. It is just kind of cool. Of course, if you do get a real version that looks decent, for kids to see that and just to put their hands, you know, on top of her hands. But this was December the 1st, 1955. Can somebody jump online and tell me, or does someone have that ability where I can give you a date and you tell me what day of the week it is? Some people's brains can do that. Did y'all know that? What day of the week was December 1st, 1955? I want to know what day of the week she got arrested on.
It was a Thursday.
All right, so Thursday evening, and now here comes the police report. Who had the police report? I'm glad we can see this one.
We did.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me what you found out.
So some of it was pretty hard to read, but we found out her charge was basically like refusing to obey the orders of the bus driver.
Yes.
It also listed, like we said, we thought she was married. It did list that she had a husband on it. It also listed her occupation, which we were trying to read, and we think it says something about alterations.
Yes. Yes. So she was a seamstress. So she did work in a department store, like hemming dresses, hemming pants. Yeah.
And then we were also trying to read down below her charges where it says disposition. It looks like it says maybe $10 and then something, but we
$10 fine, and then I think it says plus court costs or whatever, right? So yes, there was a fine. She was it says that she was born in 1913. So can someone do the math? If it was 1955 and she was born in 1913, how old was Ms. Parks?
She was 42.
She was 42. Ooh, she's so old and tired. Y'all, if 42 is old, just bury me.
Dr. Bellis.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting because I think like I was someone that genuinely like thought she was older. And I feel like it speaks volumes that when you look at the pictures of her, she looks like this frail old woman.
So here's my question, Alicia. Who benefits from her being characterized in that way?
Well, I feel like there's multiple ways that like it could be because it's first off, it's the narrative itself of her saying no to a seat. And so like a white man was asking this frail old Black woman to get out of her seat. So I think that's one part of the narrative. But then I think it also shows, oh, she was an old woman, like she was so weak type of thing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. And so let's think about that. If she is portrayed as a tired old lady, right, we can sort of overlook her Blackness. Does that make sense to you? If she was young and a very dark-skinned Black woman and she was a lot more vocal, perhaps, and said, I'm not getting up, right, as opposed to no, no, right, that was Rosa, no. And this woman who was, you know, the woman who I was portraying in a different light, right, that story wouldn't have worked out the same. I'm going to drop a name in the chat box and y'all do a little Google for me. Hey, buddy. Who's Claudette Colvin?
I actually wrote a story about her in 7th grade, and it was the first time it was like in one of those giant literacy textbooks. And this was one of the stories on her, and she was 15 years old, and she actually said no before Rosa Parks did. And so even though Rosa Parks really say that, like, people say that, like, Rosa Parks was the start of, like, the Montgomery boycott, but, like, Claudette Colvin, like, happened way before then. Or it actually, when you look at it's 9 months earlier.
Okay. So if there's a Claudette Colvin, there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. Do you see what I'm saying? So why Rosa? Okay, look at her, right? And if the story is that, if the story is, you know, that there was only one and no one had ever fought the bus laws before, but this poor old lady, she's tired, and you know what? The white people are going to be nice, and we're just going to concede, and we're going to say, okay, you know, no more segregation on the buses, right? It creates this nice little packaged story with a nice little ribbon around it, and everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya at the end. But that's not how this went. There were women before who would pay money in the front of the bus. They would go to the back of the bus and start to get on. There was a woman dragged by her arm because the bus driver would just take off before folks could get into the back of the bus. So don't think that this was one isolated incident. What we've done is we've heroified, that's a historical term, heroified Rosa into this story of this one person who did this one act on this one day, and it sparked the change, right? And that's not what happened. That story, when we tell it in that way, when we only give resistors and agitators and abolitionists, we let them be represented by one person, like Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr. You follow me? When we do that, we do a disservice to the actual work and organization and planning and education that went in to this movement. There is no way one tired old black lady in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama could have changed all of this by not wanting to stand up one day, one time in the evening. No way on earth. She was educated in civil disobedience. She went to school with Martin Luther King Jr. at the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee. She learned about how to exercise her rights. Y'all heard about the Greensboro sit-in? This stuff was happening all over the place. Look at your news right now. You see Black Lives Matter in every major city. Boom, boom, boom. The country was on fire, just like it's on fire now. Okay? This stuff was happening all over. But what happens over the course of history when we decide to retell how something went that has to do with culture and a real critical look with at ourselves, we like to tell the nice version of it. I know y'all know the truth about Columbus, and some of y'all, it kind of busted you up a little bit. You were like, hold on, why was I taught all this stuff about this person? Well, why were you taught this stuff about Rosa, but not about what she did to get to this point and who she was working with and what groups she led, right? She was part of the Women's Political Council. She was part of the Montgomery Improvement Association. She was part of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. She was involved in a ton of civil organizations to help get this off the ground. So when she got arrested and she got to the police station and she made her phone call, she called E.D. Nixon, who knew this was about to go down. And she said, it's happened. It happened today. So this was planned, big time planned. And the reason that it worked is because it was planned and because there were so many grassroots organizations and churches, which we discount, black churches in Montgomery, Alabama, that helped this movement. Okay. I went on a tangent. Give me a second. All right. So who had this one? This is where we're going next. The flyer.
I had it.
Tell us what you learned.
Or
what do you think? Do you know what it is?
Yes. So it is a newspaper article. Me and Sarah had it, or Sarah and I had it. So you can read it, or I can read it. It's kind of like the text. It's a typewriter, so it's kind of hard. But this is so at the top it says, this is for Monday, December 5th, 1955. Another Negro woman has been arrested and thrown into jail because she refused to get up out of her seat on the bus for a white person to sit down. It is the second time the
That's supposed to say Claudette Colvin. Joanne Robinson typed this on her typewriter with fast fingers and misspelled her last name, but she's actually referring to Claudette Colvin. That's why I had you look her up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Case that a Negro woman has been arrested for the same thing. This has to be stopped. Negroes have rights too. For if Negroes did not ride the buses, they could not operate. 3/4 of the riders are Negroes. Yet we are arrested or have to stand over empty seats. If we do not do something to stop these arrests, they will continue. The next time, it may be you or your daughter or mother. This woman's case will come up on Monday. We are therefore asking every Negro to stay off the buses Monday in protest of the arrest and trial. Don't ride the buses to work, to town, to school, anywhere on Monday. You can afford to stay out of school for one day if you have no other way to go except by bus. You can also afford to stay out of town for one day. If you work, take a cab or walk. But please, children and grown-ups, don't ride the bus at all on Monday. Please stay off of all buses, is what it says. So we were looking at it, and we know that Rosa was arrested, and then this was put out. Her case was going to go to trial on Monday. So on the day that her trial was going to be out, I'm assuming this was a black newspaper, that where the article was published, or like something that was sent out to make everyone aware to not go to the buses on Monday.
So it wasn't published. It was typed in Joanne Robinson's, I don't know whose house they were in. Maybe Rosa Parks' house, maybe E.D. Nixon's house. We're going to look him up in a little bit. But Joanne Robinson was, I believe, the president of the NAACP at that time, just as involved as Rosa in all of these organizations, very good friend of Rosa's. She was sort of at the ready to type this out whenever it happened. And so remember what day she got arrested? What day of the week? Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah, she got arrested on Thursday, and her hearing, she didn't have a trial, but her hearing was going to be Monday. And so this flyer went out. Joanne typed it. Now, back then, they didn't have copy machines. They had these things called mimeograph machines. Have you ever heard of such a thing? They're like big cylinders, and you put the paper in it, and you turn a wheel like this, and you crank it, and it turns around, and it spits out paper, and it copies it in like a purple color. And she printed these off on her mimeograph machine, copied them off. And guess who spread them everywhere, all over the black neighborhoods? The children. That's right. So she gave all the children this stacks of these flyers, and she was like, go forth, children. And they were tacking it on telephone poles and handing it to everybody they knew and making sure everybody knew, don't ride the buses. It's a total boycott. No buses. Because more so than showing your anger, that's not what the boycott was about. What was the boycott really about? Where did they want to hit Montgomery where it hurt?
They wanted to hit them in the wallet. There it is.
It always goes back to the almighty dollar every single time. Follow it. It always goes back to the money. And that was it. They said, listen, we pay to ride the bus. 3/4 of your bus riders, 75% of people who ride your city buses are people of color, and we don't have a seat. It's standing room only. A lot of buses would just come by and they wouldn't stop because there was no more room in the colored section. And so it wasn't okay, right? It was unequal treatment. It wasn't equitable. It was completely racist, and they had had enough. And so what they did is they boycotted, and they let that boycott. Someone said it lasted a long time. That's great that you know that. Some people think that it lasted a couple weeks or something. It lasted 382 days. That's over a year. So she was arrested December the 1st. Boycott started December the 5th. That means, y'all, they went through an entire year. 1956, no black people rode the buses in Montgomery, Alabama in the entire year of 1956. What? How do you do that? That's how they were getting to school. That's how they were getting to work. That's how they were getting to church, right? The whole community had to get on board with this idea to make it work. There were white folks taking out you were talking about a newspaper article. There were white folks taking out advertisements saying, hey, send $1 to your Montgomery City bus line so that they don't have to choke. You know what I mean? Because the white people that needed to ride the bus were like, oh shit, what are we gonna do if the buses stop running, right? Y'all have seen The Help. Have you seen this movie? It's not the most accurate historical fiction, but it gives you some idea of how important women of color were in the homes of white women in Montgomery, Alabama. And so if you're a white woman at home and you have a woman of color raising your children, and you hear about this bus boycott and you think, how is my nanny going to get to my house? There were white women, you know, secretly picking up their nannies and things like that. So things started happening, right? It wasn't just cut and dry. Things were happening. Here's another crazy story. The city of Montgomery said, oh, y'all are going to use your church station wagons to help get people to work. Okay, who's been a member of a church that has a church van? Okay, so in Montgomery, it was like that, but they were like station wagons, okay, that they would go pick up the old people to bring them to church, you know, whatever the church vans do, take the kids somewhere. Well, these church station wagons, they called them rolling churches, and they'd roll around and pick people up and take them to work. And so there was a lot of, like I said, grassroots organization to help keep the buses empty of people of color, right? So they all got together, like, how are we gonna get this person to work and that person to school and all of this? Most people just walked, which, you know, for a year, think about all of the elements and how hot it is in the summertime in Montgomery, Alabama. But these rolling churches would go by. So the city of Montgomery said, okay, you're going to use those station wagons. We're just not going to write you any insurance policies for those cars. And so since they're not insured, you can't drive them. Well, y'all, this was not just a Montgomery issue or a United States issue. The world was watching our foolishness over here in the United States. And there were people in London who said, oh, they're not going to insure you? No problem. So this company called Lloyd's of London was writing insurance policies on station wagons in Montgomery, Alabama, so that they were legal to drive on the street and take people to work. Y'all, that's organization. That's people giving a rip about something that's happening across the pond, right? We have receipts from folks who were sending in donations for the cause. They would send it to the NAACP or the Montgomery Improvement Association. And so there were, you know, we have copies of registers that just say $5 came in from Texas, $3 came in from Pennsylvania for the cause. And so there were people contributing to this cause. It was not isolated. It didn't just happen in Montgomery. It created a ripple effect to where people started paying attention and caring about what was happening. Let's look at a couple of these pictures real quick, and then I'll move us on. Who had the Holt Street Baptist Church? I'm going to get there in a second. I want to look at the walking real quick. So just to give you an idea, these are time lapse pictures from the Montgomery bus boycott. So this was a common scene. You notice people in their, you know, people dressed good back then, y'all. Look at all the men had hats and like nice sports coats. But the women are in their hose and their work shoes and their collared shirts, right? And they're having to protect themselves from the elements, not being able to ride the bus. Here's another one. It's going to be fuzzy. That shows folks walking. That was pretty common. So who had Holt Street Baptist Church? I want to talk about MLK for a second.
Me and Jessica had that.
Have y'all ever seen this picture before?
I had it. I don't think Jessica had either.
Okay.
So basically we gathered from this that this was MLK speaking at a church, and we figured that just because of the attire of the people in the audience, and then also like the glass panes on the window. And we also came to the conclusion that this was in the aftermath of Rosa Parks and like maybe in the middle of the boycott. We weren't exactly sure. So our question was like, when did this occur exactly in the timeline? And I had never heard this speech before. So we were also wondering like, what was the speech?
So this was at the Holt Street Baptist Church. Y'all check this out. Do you know how old MLK was in 1955, 1956? He was 27 years old, I believe, 26 or 27. So just wrap your mind around that for a minute. I keep talking about E.D. Nixon, and I haven't told you who he is, but E.D. was sort of the mastermind behind this whole plan and involved in all the organizations, except the Women's Political Council that I mentioned earlier. But E.D. Was looking for a young, dynamic Black preacher who could sort of lead this movement, that could lead a nonviolent movement for racial equality in America. And he had heard of MLK. MLK had been to the Highlander Folk School with Rosa Parks. ED was friends with Rosa. There were probably about 20 Black churches and preachers at that time that ED started looking into and sort of asking folks. He was calling them at home and asking them if they could use their church to organize for the boycott. And so this was the Sunday before folks stopped riding the bus on Monday, okay, in Montgomery, Alabama, at the Holt Street Baptist Church. And MLK had been called by E.D. Nixon. I think he was like number 17 on his list or something. And he called him up and said, hey, new young guy, I really think you'd be great to lead this boycott, and you heard about it, right? And so can we come to your church? And he said, I don't think I mean, think about this. To say yes would be saying like, okay, my church might get bombed with my parishioners in it, you know? And so it was a really bold step. And he said no. And Edie said, that's okay. You just think about it. I'll call you back in a little while. And he ended up calling him back and just kind of coercing him to do it. So MLK wasn't like, here I come to Montgomery to run this thing. He was coerced and asked. And of course he agreed, but that's him. I mean, imagine facing this many people in a new city. You opened up your new church, you're this new preacher, and you're going to take this on. And so if you look back, you see standing room only up in the balcony up above the church. That's what I love about this picture, is that you can see back into the doorway, and people were just spilling out. And he was basically saying, you know, this is our time. We don't need to be riding the bus. This is how we're going to do this. So it was peaceful. But the boycott lasted 382 days. You will find in a book, it might say 381, but 1956 was a leap year. They forget about February the 29th. So 382, y'all, that's the truth. I did my research. So what happened is that the bus line was severely hurt financially. And so they had to concede. It wasn't Rosa Parks' court case. That's something that gets, that people get mixed up. It wasn't Rosa's court case that actually ended the segregation on the buses. It was 5 women who had been through a similar thing. And it was a court case called Browder versus Gale. And Gale was the mayor of the city of Montgomery. And so that case came later at the end of 1956. And ended that. But it was Rosa's initial action that sort of set everything in motion. So did she spark a movement? Yes. Did she do it all by herself? Hell no, she did not. It took the entire Black community. It took folks in London. It took folks sending money from other states in our country. So it was a bigger ordeal than it gets portrayed to be. So back to that question. Who benefits from the story being told this way? When we package it nicely and we think that just one person caused an entire culture shift, we love that story about ourselves and our country. You know, someone said, this isn't fair. And we responded by saying, okay, we'll make it fair then. And that's not how change has happened in our country. So when you hear things on news outlets lately, people are saying, you know, protest is American. Protesting and resisting and finding ways to say, no, we're not okay with this is very American. And in fact, it's the only way that change has occurred is by people pressuring people in power.
Dr. Bellows, just to go off of that, I just got an alert on my phone, but the city of Louisville agrees to a $12 million settlement with Breonna Taylor's family. And I think that just really shows that, like, there were a lot of protests, a lot of petitions signed, a lot of calls. I just thought it was very relevant to what we were talking about.
Drop it in the chat for us, Alicia.
Yeah, I'll get it right now. It came up on Twitter, so, like, it's a Twitter news live link, but I'll drop it in there.
Y'all in your tweets. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Comments or questions? How are you feeling about Rosa? Let's go back. Here's what we knew. So was it the mid 1950s, 1955? Boycott lasted how long?
382 days.
Y'all pay attention. Now here's the deal, right, about history, teaching history. I don't care if my students know that number, 382. I care that they can tell me what you just did. It lasted a long time. Someone said around 400 days. If they just know that it lasted about a year through all the elements, do you see? It's not really the date that matters. Mid 1950s, cool, yeah, that's when it happened. But yeah, don't get caught up when you're teaching historical events to kids about specific dates. But if you teach it well, they will remember. And if you show them pictures of people walking, right, they're going to remember that they walked through the elements and that they walked through rain and snow and sun. Well, I don't know about snow in Mobile or Birmingham, but anyway, so think about what your big ideas are that you want to get across to kids more so than these little piddly details. The piddly details, though, really paint the picture, don't they? And kind of help it to stick. But when you're assessing knowledge, you're just really looking to make sure that kids know, first of all, they know how to analyze things like you guys just did, but that they can put it together in some cohesive way. So here we have, she did not sit in her designated area. Yes, she was tired from working, maybe, but that wasn't really it. She was tired of being mistreated. Yeah, we didn't really talk about what happened that day. There was actually the bus driver that she had the encounter with and who got her arrested that day. She had a negative encounter with him before, the same guy. And so actually when she got on the bus, she kind of thought, oh man, I've dealt with this jerk before. You know what I mean? And so to me, that even shows a little more bravery. Like she knew what this guy was all about because he was a jerk to her before. His name was James Blake, I believe. And so she got on the bus, she paid her money, and she got on the bus and she sat down. There were no white people in the front area, so she sat down in one of those seats. She was sitting, you saw in that diagram that she was sitting near the window. And here's a part of the story that I found out that I didn't really know, but there was a black young man that had come and sat next to her. But then a white man got on the bus. And so if you were sitting in that section, you had to get up. And so the young man that sat next to her, thanks Alicia, the young man that sat next to her was like, lady, get up, you know, like white dude just got on. And so she got out to let him out and she sat back down and scooted toward the window. And that's when the white guy was like, this woman won't move. And the bus driver was like, you have to move. And she was like, she didn't say anything. And the only thing she said when he said, I'm going to arrest you, or I'm going to have you arrested, she said, you may do that. You may do that. You may arrest me.
Yeah, I had no idea that was a story. Real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought it was that I didn't know the part where if like there was no white people sitting, like they could sit there. Like I was taught, or maybe I just remember it this way, that it was all of the white seats were taken. Like the white section was like filled with white people, and she was sitting in a seat because there was enough people. And the reason why she had to get up was because like that was like the last seat available for like a white person. So, like, that's so different. That's crazy.
It is, yeah. The young man was sitting towards the window, yeah.
That's insane.
So he was like,
really, like, her sitting there really affected him because, you know, all those other 12 seats, like, that's just mind-blowing.
Yep. So, brave, yes. Older in her 60s, and then someone said, maybe like 40-ish. Yeah, she was 40-ish. That's not old. Yeah, and she was married to whom? His name was Mr. Parks. It really, I can't remember his first name. She wanted to go somewhere. She was going home from work. Was it planned? Yes, yes, yes. Montgomery, Alabama. Okay, good. So we got through all of our knowledge. And what you can do with kids too, is you can add to that, right? Because they're going to have more things that they learned in addition to what you asked them in the beginning. So more than just editing and fixing, they can add their new knowledge. Y'all have heard of KWL charts. So historical thinking kind of follows that. What do you know? And then as you looked at your documents, you asked your questions. That was the what do you want to know? And then the what do you learned is when we come back and we adjust that initial learning. So I want to talk to you about historical thinking and that process that we just went through. Like I said, you've got the Prezi link in As You Learn here. And so you can refer to that. You don't have to jot down fast notes or anything. But basically, historical thinking comes out of this idea that teaching history or the official history is not giving our students what they need in terms of content knowledge to help them form their own identities and think about others, right? So we build all these myths to just make it easily digestible and to tell nice stories. Y'all, they've been doing it for eons. Do you remember Aesop's fables? You probably have some little golden books that teach little stories to you, right? We do it with history too, with real things too. For example, the first Thanksgiving, y'all, I'm sorry, it never happened. We just made that up. We made it a holiday later. We made up a story that's nice to tell, that tells us to be grateful for, you know, being with different people. The Pilgrims were not clean people, y'all. You know, we're still dressing up kids with these clean, like little pilgrim paper sacks or white paper, cardboard cutout pilgrim uniform or outfits. And then we have our Indians, right, in their crumpled up paper sacks and their feathers on their heads. And we're totally stereotyping and culturally appropriating inappropriately when we do that. Thanksgiving didn't happen. Columbus did not discover that the earth was round. We knew the earth was round before he ever set sail in 1492. He never even landed on the United States, right? Like all these things. That Rosa Parks acted alone, or that she was old and tired and changed civil rights forever because of that. We heroify historical figures. We vilify others. If I say, who was the worst, most evil man in the entire history, who would you say?
Hitler.
There it is, Hitler. Yes, yes. We used to call the History Channel the Hitler Channel. It's all they did was play stuff about Hitler. But y'all, we have vilified this person thinking that he single-handedly was just this awful person that made everybody else do awful things. Well, no, people contributed to that, right? And people were complicit in that. We leave out certain historical figures. I've mentioned E.D. Nixon's name a few times and didn't even take the time to tell you who he is, and I won't now, but that's someone that we could study. There are folks, we could look into Joanne Robinson, we could look into Claudette Colvin, we could look into this bus driver, James Blake, right, to tell that story in a more complete way. And then on top of all that, in 2000 and starting in 2000-2001 school year, we initiated No Child Left Behind, which left social studies completely behind. And so we have this squeeze effect of high stakes testing when we get up to the secondary levels. And we know that we don't have protected time for social studies anymore in the elementary school. Y'all did your jigsaws on that. So how are we thinking about history instead of thinking about it in that dominant narrative way? We don't just collect a bunch of facts. History is actually an argument about what multiple details mean. So one thing that I like to highlight with that is the dropping of the atomic bomb. And so you think about Truman as president, that was his decision. Do you think that he just decided that one night and walked into the Oval Office and picked up the bat phone and whatever, called on, you know, and said, drop the bombs? He had multiple and lengthy conversations with people that he respected, and he wanted to hear people's advice, right? And so when you tell that story, how do you take into account the person of Truman and how difficult that must have been? The nature of historical evidence, attempting to carefully reconstruct historical context. So for example, we love this image of, let's see if I can find it real quick, of, what's her name? Betsy Ross flag. See that? Here we go. there's always this lovely image that makes it look like Betsy is like birthing the nation as she sews. Here, like this right here. Isn't that lovely? And so, do we have any idea who might have sewed the flag instead of Betsy Ross? A slave. A slave sewed the flag, not Betsy. So you can read this historical paradox, read about it all you want. There's tons of stuff out there that's like, there's no evidence, and other people are like, yes, we must say that Betsy did that. She really did. Yeah.
I have a question for you. So like, I've like been sharing with my own parents about like the things I've been learning in this course because I just think it's very interesting. And like, there are even some times where like I'll say something and my dad's like, well, like blah 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 blah. And like, I guess I just wonder like what do you do with that when you have a parent that comes in and is like, Betsy Ross sewed the flag. Like, I know it. Like, this is what, like, what do you do? Because, like, my own parents, like, I'll talk back a little bit to them. Like, I don't really care. But, like, when it's, like, a child's parent and, like, that's your job, like, what do you do? Like, you've mentioned a lot about, like, having a district that, like, supports it. I don't know. I guess I just wonder, like, parents are really scary and intimidating, especially when you're teaching their child. And so I just, like, want to hear your perspective on, like, how you deal with that when you decide to teach controversial things in your classroom.
Yeah, we're actually, and I'm not avoiding your question, but I'm serving as a guest speaker in my friend's class tomorrow about controversial issues, and we're going to touch on that briefly today when we get to 9/11. And I do have a session just about talking about controversial issues, and we're getting to that. Hold on, I think I have my course plan right here. We're getting to that controversial issues. Week number 9. Week number 9, we're going to do controversial issues. And so we're going to tackle this topic, Alicia, for sure. But I know that your fears are real. And anytime we talk about any of this content, you worry about 2 things. You worry about your administration and you worry about your parents. And those are real fears. But I will tell you, first of all, as a parent, I don't have time to complain or even really know what's going on in my 5th graders classroom. Let's just be real. Number 2, if anybody had a problem with any of the social studies curriculum that's being taught in Ashe County, it would be me. And so I find ways to talk to teachers gently. But there are, and let me just be real, some crazy parents out there who will try to attack what it is that you're trying to teach. Because we're talking about historical thinking today, and we'll talk about controversial issues later, if you're teaching a historical lesson and you are using primary sources like we just did, and you are using actual evidence that historians have written about and found, and in your standards, you're meeting a standard, they really have nothing to, they have no backing, except for that they differ in their opinion. And so a differing opinion is nothing you're going to get fired over. And really, you're not coming at it with an opinion. You're coming at it with evidence and with primary sources. There's also, I'll just drop one more nugget for you. There also is so much evidence, especially now, about teaching with multiple perspectives and in inclusive ways, that if you are showing that this is a way that you do that, then you should not be able to be called out for that. Okay, we're getting there. All right, and the interpretation paradox, and this is just like sometimes we find a historical topic that is a paradox, such as the assassination of JFK. Right, we still haven't come to a complete agreement on that historically, and so you sort of teach different theories about it. All of this is to say that we used to teach in much more behavioristic ways, and now we teach in more constructivist ways, and so that's what we experience today in the historical thinking workshop. And so constructivism sort of came out of social theories as we moved from the 1980s into the 1990s. And so we really started talking in the 80s about multicultural education, was sort of a buzzword back then. And we started to see that it was going to be important to include women and people of color in our retellings of history in our textbooks. But instead of sort of changing the narrative like we did with Rosa today and the boycott, we sort of changed that narrative for ourselves, right? Instead of doing that with the textbooks, they literally inserted little nuggets on the side. So you might envision like a social studies textbook about World War II, right? And then off to the side, it'll say like, Rosie the Riveter, here's what the women were doing. Here's what the Black people were doing. So like the story never changed. They just sort of inserted marginalized groups as these little like literal asides instead of being part of the story. And so historical thinking is getting to that point where we're not just thinking about this as inserting more details, but we're actually rethinking how we tell the story like we just did with Rosa. So what is historical thinking? It's the critical retelling of history. So you're using critical thinking skills. You try not to be biased, right? You just try to tell the facts. You use actual primary sources to develop an opinion, and you help students make their interpretation of the sources that they have. Putting them in context by what we call source work. And this is just contextualizing, like we looked at the police report, and so then you could put the fingerprints up against that to corroborate the date, for example, of when she got arrested. So that's using source work. And then questioning, and so we come up with questions or DBQs. Did anyone do DBQs in high school? To some people, that's like you get twitchy when you hear DBQ. But that's all it is. It's taking these documents and asking questions that have to do with all of this historical thinking stuff. So when we do historical thinking, we change how we came to know what we know. How many of you today was the first time you've ever seen a diagram of what that bus looked like in 1955? It seems like that's an important piece of the story, to kind of know what the bus looks like. And so as you're teaching something, even if you don't know everything about it, like I've done this Rosa thing in and out a million times, right? You're not going to be that way with stuff that you've just learned yourself. But when the kids ask questions like, well, what did the bus look like? Don't avoid the question. Say, let's go figure that out. Let's go find out what the bus looked like, right? And so let them lead to this shift in epistemological stance. Positionality, we know positionality is really important. Knowing all of that about Rosa, that she was very educated, the same about MLK when I talked about that, what their positionality was, how old they were, right? Like all of that plays a role. Think about Rosa was 42 getting arrested, and here comes MLK at 27 years old and letting his church be the place of to gather. Emphasize the uncomfortable and controversial. Alicia, this goes to your point. If you feel like, ooh, this is going to be hard to talk about, oh my gosh, do it, because you're going to get some profound learning in that moment. Uncomfortable and controversial, that's polka dot brain. Primary sources, and DBQs, which we've talked about. I'm going to skip over these next two and just really talk about these elements of historical thinking. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero in on empathy and moral judgment as we sort of reflect on the historical moment of 9/11, which happened 19 years ago. Some of you might have heard a little something about 9/11 in the news this week, or maybe watched a documentary. Sometimes specials come up around this time, and so we'll talk about that. But these are basic elements of historical thinking. So if you are doing these things when you teach history, you're doing historical thinking. You're getting kids to think about significance. Why is this important? Why are we studying about Rosa Parks and Montgomery bus boycott? Well, it's significant because look what's happening in the world today, right? And so helping kids draw that connection to an issue of today. And I promise you can do it with most any historical topic, draw relevance to today. Using epistemology and evidence, how have we come to know what we know, and how are we going to challenge that? And that's what we did as we jotted down our prior knowledge and then went into our evidence in order to change the way that we learned that. Continuity and change is talking about how things have stayed the same and how things are different. So we could talk about difference with the Rosa story in terms of segregation, right? We can talk about how things are the same, perhaps in terms of racism and racist ideals in our country, but perhaps the change is that it's become more covert instead of overt, right? So we can talk about continuity and change. Progress and decline. Can you classify that particular piece of history as a moment that the United States was shining? Was this a shining moment for us, a moment of progress, or was this not a shining moment? There's an author named James Lowen. Have y'all ever seen this book? It's called Lies My Teacher Told Me. And Lies My Teacher Told Me, he makes this argument about that we tend to teach history like we're just always doing better. And we just get better and better and smarter as a human race. And when we teach history that way, that it's constant progress, students tend to look at people in the past and think that they were dumb, right? Like there were people sitting around in a log cabin with a candle going, sure wish someone would have been electricity, but no one's smart enough yet. So I guess we'll just sit here for a little bit longer. You know, that's not how history works, right? It's not inevitable. And so we need to give the agency back to those people. We'll get to agency in a second. So do we classify this as a moment of progress or decline? What do you think about the Rosa story? Is that a moment of progress or decline?
I would say progress, just because like it kind of led to a lot of new things happening and a lot of like more, it didn't fix all the problems obviously, but like it led to more things being changed to like a more equal way of life. So I mean, I would say progress.
Yeah, a little bit of progress. We might see decline in the way people reacted, maybe, where their sort of covert racism came out overtly in the newspaper and things like that. I think we're seeing that today also. I think we can have both moments at the same time. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. But yeah, so if we can help students pick out the progress and decline pieces, you're doing historical thinking. Empathizing with decisions that people had to make. We're going to really focus on that one here in a minute. And then historical agency. This one's important. It's about power. So how do individuals face difficult choices and speak up for their beliefs? And so when somebody said Rosa was brave, like I realized how brave that was. That's historical agency. Sister had bravery and courage, right? And so because of that, that sparked something, right? So do I want to talk about that? No, we already did all that. Okay, cool. So here's what I want to do. In the last 25 minutes, I see we have 25 minutes. No, yes. So what I want at 24 minutes, what I want to do is I want us to focus on 9/11 as a historical topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some footage that might be disturbing to you. And so we're going to take a minute to breathe and kind of focus before we take a look. You're going to hear some things as well. And then we're going to talk about that and debrief it, and then listen some more and debrief some more. What we'll be focusing on is empathy. So you're going to be trying to imagine yourself in a certain place at a certain time to evoke that historical empathy. Before we do that activity, can you tell me, just sort of debrief with me, give me some feedback. How did it feel to go through the historical thinking workshop? How are you feeling now? What was that experience like for you as a learner?
I liked it because we got to really talk about our misconceptions that we had. I think as teachers, we want to look at misconceptions that our kids may have, and then be able to correct them in a way where it's not like condescending, like, well, you're wrong because this is what actually happened, but go into the, well, why did you think this? Like, what were you told to make you think that this is what happened? So I think it was just really nice to like have a respectful view of it, because I feel like a lot of the time, like, especially when we're talking about things like that are like essentially still going on. I know like I can get emotional about it. And so like just having people that are respectful, like talking about these things, I think is a really cool way to move on in these like subject areas.
Cool. Anyone else? How was that for you?
I feel like personally, like I learned it better because I was interested into like seeing if our answers were right and wrong, and I was just like more engaged in like, I don't know, maybe it's like the way you taught it, and now that I'm older, but I really liked it.
Going off of that, Sarah, I feel like this felt more like an investigation and less of this you telling us what happened, when it happened, why it happened. Like, this kind of allowed us to look at these documents and form our own opinions about this event and really get a more concrete idea of what actually was going on, and like being able to see these primary sources. Like, I love looking at primary resources that are from the actual event just because it's like more concrete and more, I don't know, telling of what happened.
I also feel like too, it kind of reminds me of like, so at science, like our engage activity will be something that like debunks people's thinking of like something like a preconceived notion that they have. And I felt like with this kind of followed the same thing of like when you brought up Colette Coven, like her and like us like not really understanding that like this had been done many, many times before. I think it challenges our own thinking.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? That's critical thinking. And I know I keep going back to the Kumashiro drawings, the figures going into the school and coming out, but remember the one that just had all the lines and he went into the school and it had more of the same and he came out and it's just more of the same? Y'all, that was how you learned Rosa. Like, it was just, you know, sort of trite, trivial information, just learning more of the same. Then you come to college and you're like, what? And so we don't want our kids to have that experience when they're 18, 19, 20. We want them to be able to have those experiences so that not only are they learning the history like more accurately, but they're learning that they need to be critical about the information that they receive, you know? And so I think especially today, especially the way that we receive information, that it's super, super important. Okay, I want to move on. Thank you for debriefing that with me. So the journey box that you put together, like I said, I need a minute to get everything for your asynchronous work ready on As You Learn. I had I had something this morning. And so I'll get that up. As You Learn was being clunky for me this morning. And so if you look, you don't see your asynchronous work yet for this week. So just, if you'll just be patient with me, I'll get that to you ASAP. But basically what I'm going to have you do is read over the journey box assignment so that we can talk about it next week, because you'll notice on our As You Learn, we're doing weeks 5 and 6 are both historical thinking weeks or teaching history weeks. And so we're going to extend this conversation. And I know we haven't had a chance to do our JRGs for our civics articles, but we're just rolling with it. I try to give you as much as I can. And so sometimes if things get chopped off, I hope that's okay. But thanks for being patient with me. So what I want us to do is I want us to watch a chunk of the Today Show from Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001. So this is something that happened in your lifetime. Yes, I'm not away from people's lifetimes yet with 9/11. When I first started teaching this stuff in 2009, you can imagine, like, I was teaching college in 2009. And so a lot of my students were in middle school and high school when 9/11 happened. And now I'm getting to where I'm losing memories with all of my groups of students as the years go by. So you guys were what, 2 years old or something? Some might have been a little older. Okay. So it's very unlikely that you've seen this footage. It's an as it happened footage, and I'm not going to show the whole thing. I mean, clearly we don't have a ton of time, but I want to show you, which is really weird now that I think about it, because in this particular year, none of this would probably be that surprising to you if this were to happen today, based on how 2020 has gone, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you've sort of been inundated with gloom and doom all year long. And I hope that doesn't cause a desensitization with all of us, but I haven't watched this since the spring semester. But when you watch, I want you to listen for a woman named Jennifer Overstein that they're going to talk to. So it's the Today Show with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, before Matt Lauer was accused of all of his sexual misconduct. Okay. They used to be like, you know, the power couple on the morning show in 2001. And so when they talk to Jennifer Overstein, who's down at ground zero while the towers are being attacked, I'm going to ask you to focus in on her voice. And so I'll try to alert you of that when it comes up.
I appreciate the book is called Hughes. We want to go live right now and show you a picture of the World Trade Center, where I understand, do we have it? No, we do not. We have a breaking story, though. We're going to come back with that in just a moment. First, this is today on NBC.
And I always show the commercials because it just contextualizes things.
Why drive all over town and compare cars? Make one stop at CarMax and test drive an Accord, Taurus, and Camry. We have nearly every make and model, 10 times more cars than the
I really like her
dealer.
hair.
So you get the car you want. CarMax, the way car buying should be.
Why do warehouse clubs and superstores offer the lowest prices? Because they sell in volume. CarMax, the auto superstore, has up to 10 times more cars than the average dealer, so we can afford to offer below Blue Book prices. CarMax, the way car buying should be.
Welcome to Wardrobe 911.
Okay, y'all, Wardrobe 911.
How do you get that designer look without breaking the bank? Wow, great designer. Fortunately, it's designer we can rock.
Look at this jacket.
Fabulous, right?
At Designer Week, you'll find the latest in career and casual clothing at unbelievable savings.
Y'all that was me
So expensive.
in the 90s. Not really.
Ooh, thanks, designer we can rock. And you do it too.
Designer Week at Ross. Don't miss it.
What makes you smile?
Mickey
Every day at
D.
McDonald's, we're serving up a variety of great tastes at breakfast. Whether you like scrambled eggs with pancakes, egg McMuffins, sausage biscuits with egg, or our delicious bagel sandwiches, we've got something hot, fresh, and made to order just for you. And remember, no breakfast is complete without coffee and the cool, fresh squeezed taste of Minute Maid orange juice. Start off your day.
It's McDonald's before they put caution hot on their cups.
It was also before they had breakfast all day long.
As Matt just mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
Dr. Bellows, when you muted yourself, we can't hear the video.
Hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and to give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come up and I heard a boom woke up and there was a big ball of fire. I'm now looking north at the World Trade Center, and it is the West Twin Towers. I'm looking north. I'm in Battery Park right now, and you can hear the fire engines and the emergency crews behind me. And it is unbelievable. When the fire first burst, it was a hello.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
In air like I've never seen before. And as you know, I used to work in news. I've never seen any fire like this in the air. And the pieces of the building were flying down. It looks like it's like the top. I can't even tell you. Maybe 20 floors. Intense smoke. It's horrible. I can't even describe it.
Do you have any idea what kind of plane it was?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea what hit the World Trade Center?
What it was?
Yeah, what kind of plane? We're getting reports that an airplane hit the building.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Honestly, I was walking up and it looked up and saw a big boom and fire. You know, I got to tell you, we were all saying around here that it was very interesting that it would be a bomb and it would be so high up. So perhaps it was a plane. We have no top of a plane. However, I have to tell you, there are still things flying in the air. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and it's horrifying.
Jennifer, it's Matt Lauer. I'd like to.
Okay. Tell me what you heard in Jennifer's voice.
I mean, she just sounded like she was panicking. I mean, she didn't know exactly what was going on, but she knew that something terrible was happening.
What else?
She didn't even realize it was a plane. Like she literally, like, they thought it was like more of like a sky, like she didn't know what it was, and I don't think her mind, like, she was confused for sure.
Okay. What
like
else?
Like disbelief, like unable to process what was happening in front of her and what she was seeing, because like they had more information from farther away than she did right there, because it was all the chaos and everything around her with the sirens and everybody rushing to help.
Anyone else? Okay, let's go back. Oh, I had it. Here we go.
To ask you, while you were close to the building, or have you, since the explosion, seen anyone who's been injured being taken out of the building? Are there ambulances dealing with people on the sidewalk around the building?
No, I have not. I have not gotten that close. I have to tell you that my father works in the World Financial Center, and I first called over there to see, because it's next door, to see, if he was okay. I couldn't get through, and I'm far away right now. I thought it might be a little dangerous to get too close. I saw lots of debris coming down, and right now I'm in Battery Park. I don't know, it's probably a 5-minute walk from here to the World Trade Center. But the smoke is incredible. I mean, I can't see the top of the tower. It's starting to cover the top of the second tower.
In fact, we're looking at pictures right now, Jennifer, with a huge gaping hole on the side of the building and billowing smoke. So
I'm right now, I think I see major fire. I definitely see fire.
And Jennifer, you said you're looking north at the building. So in other words, you're south of the building. Is that right? Because we're looking at a picture that is looking at the north side of the building.
I'm on the exact opposite side.
And it appears that is where the largest hole is. And again, as you mentioned correctly, toward the top of the building, but on the north side, and then on the, what I think is the west side of the building, we can also see some holes there that could have been from damage once the impact occurred. Again, we've been told that if this is a plane, we don't have confirmation on that, but there is an enormous hole in the north side of that building.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit more about what you heard when you heard this explosion? Describe it for us.
Absolutely. When I walked out of the subway, I looked at the Twin Towers, because I just always look up there. And right when I looked up, there was a boom. It wasn't that loud. Like, it wasn't huge. However, what was unbelievable was the amount of fire. It was a big ball of fire that just went up. And I looked around at people. We were all horrified. I'm stuttering because I'm in such shock. I've never seen anything like it. It's horrible.
And of course, this is real cause for concern, because the World Trade Center is one of the busiest office buildings here in New York, with hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers who.
New York City.
And of course, given the time that this has happened, it's only probably appropriate to surmise that people might have been in the building.
And we've seen stories in the.
Sorry, I'm going to move us along a little bit, and we're going to hear Jennifer's voice again in a little bit. Of this terrible, terrible incident. We're going to be talking to more eyewitnesses coming up in just a few minutes.
There must have been a 3-block cloud of white smoke.
So they're talking to another person who was on the street at that time, and she's in her apartment building.
It seems to be coming out on at least 4 or 5 floors. The air is filled with hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper that are just sort of floating like confetti. The area is swarmed with emergency vehicles and sirens. Obviously, we're very sensitive to this kind of thing in this neighborhood.
Elliot, have you, of course, because of the incident that occurred in the early 1990s, have you seen any evidence, Elliot, of people being taken out of the building? You say that emergency vehicles are there, understandably so, but of course the major concern is human loss. I mean, do you know if there were many people in the building?
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it? I can see it on the shot.
Oh my.
Something else has
You know
just
what?
been
We just saw a plane circling the building. We just saw a plane circling the building a second ago on the shot right before
I
that.
think there may have been another impact. Can you tell? I just heard another very loud bang and a very large plane that might have been a DC-9 or a 747 just flew past my window, and I think it may have hit the Trade Center again.
To be honest, Elliot, I didn't get the impression that it was that big a plane.
It looks big from here.
I did see a plane go by a second ago though, and it has now impacted the building. I'm trying to see if it's the different tower.
I think it may
the
have been. I
other
believe the
tower.
first one was World Trade Center 1, and it looks from what I'm seeing on television like it may have
We're
been
going
the
to
second
see,
building.
this is a piece of tape, and we may actually see another plane enter the picture here in a second.
I wonder if there are air traffic control problems.
Let's go back to Jennifer Oberstein, who was talking to a second ago. Jennifer,
So this is Jennifer again. So of course, you know where we are in the timeline of events. The second tower has now been hit. There was a lot of pontificating and wondering and thinking maybe air traffic control problems, and maybe it was just a little commuter plane, and wondering and wondering. And once the second plane hit, the talk begins to change. And then it becomes something that felt deliberate instead of accidental. We're going to hear Jennifer's voice again, and I want you to pay attention again with your empathetic ear for how she sounds this time.
did you see this happen?
Hello?
Did you just see this happen, Jennifer?
Not. I've never seen any. It looks like a movie. I saw a large plane, like a jet, going immediately headed directly into the World Trade Center. It flew into the other tower coming from south to north. I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center. It was a jet. It was a very large plane. It was going south. It went past the Ritz-Carlton Hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past, almost hit it, and then went in.
This is so shocking, of course, to everybody watching.
I've never seen anything like it. It literally flew itself into World Trade Center.
Obviously now we move from what appears to have, there it is right there.
Again, I'm looking from south to north, and it went into the one on the right.
That appeared to be at least a 727. We saw it a second ago. Here comes the videotape that we just showed you. You will see what appears to be a large plane. It could be a 727 right there, maybe even bigger, flying right into the side of the World Trade Center.
It was at least a 727. It was a jet. I couldn't believe my eyes watching it right above me.
And now you have to move from talk about a possible accident to talk about something deliberate that has happened.
Okay. How did Jennifer sound this time?
Panicked and scared.
Distressed. Didn't she say her dad worked in that building?
Yeah. What about her voice told you that she felt this way?
She was talking really fast and her voice was kind of shaky the whole time.
Her breathing was more shallow.
So we can elicit empathy by describing how a person feels. I feel you, Brooke. Thank you for sharing that. We can describe what somebody's voice feels like or what they might have felt like. But when you can describe what it is about them that makes you think that, that's when you're taking on that empathetic, because you have known what it's like to feel these things maybe. But when you can describe it as talking fast and having a shaky voice and shallow breathing, and you can imagine her armpits sweating, and you can imagine how fast her heart was beating, right?
then you start to put yourself there and start to do some imagining. And really, historical empathy is all about that imagining. It's not about having to simulate something. You wouldn't simulate a building getting blown up by an airplane. So you wouldn't simulate what it was like to come across on a slave ship by putting students under your desk, you know, like sardines and turning the lights off. So we don't ever want to do simulations, but what we can do is we can talk about emotions and how people felt and what happens to our physical body when we have these feelings. And there is a direct tie between naming and experiencing feelings in the class meeting with your classroom community and being able to take the leap here to this place where you can feel and imagine the feeling because of our physical response when we have emotion. That's one thing that we tend to leave out. Thank you guys for sharing, and I see Valerie's comment as well. I was in July of 2001, I was at the World Trade Center at the very top after having seen Phantom of the Opera, and I was meeting my fiance's parents for the very first time. And we went to the windows on the World Restaurant at the very top, and I put my forehead on the glass and I looked down and I felt that building move. And 2 months later, it was gone. And so I can be there in an instant. But for your students who can't, right, you have to take them there somehow. And to me, the more we can tap into emotion, the more we can tap into historical empathy and start to wrap our mind around the fact that historical actors aren't just people who lived a long time ago, but they were people like us with skin and feelings and emotion and physical response, and people who made decisions in life, right? So I wanted to take you through that, not to upset you, and I'm definitely empathetic to your emotional responses. But I want to take you there because I want you to know that you can go there and that we can look at history through the eyes of people who lived through it. And I want you to start to see yourself as a historical actor. You've done a lot of self-discovery in terms of your identity so far this semester. And so I want you to identify yourself as a historical actor. What is it that you would like people in the future, or your children or grandchildren in the future, to know about this moment in 2020? What was it like to be in college and be online all the time? And what was it like to have to wear a mask into the grocery store? And so I want us to start thinking about that. I'm going to push you towards some more historical thinking stuff in your async work this week. So like I said, please look for that. I'll probably send you a little nudge email and say, okay, As You Learn is ready for you, just to remind you that it's there, because it's not there right now. But basically, you're going to be thinking about your Journey Box topic, okay? You might look through Takaki at the different chapters that we're going to be reading about to see if there might be a topic embedded in there somewhere. But I believe our Journey Box, we're going to be working in groups of 3 to 4 people on our Journey Box, and we're going to do it digitally. And so you're going to read the directions for that. I'm going to have a video for you to watch about historical thinking, and then I'm going to have a couple of articles for you to read about the Journey Box. I think your reflection this week will be a Flipgrid reflection instead of a countdown summary. So look for that. What questions do you have? I know I kept you 2 minutes over. Today was kind of heavy. Everybody okay? Deep breath. And everybody wave and give kisses to Claire, because she's going to watch this video later. We love you. I miss you, Claire. All right, y'all have a good week, and reach out if I can assist you in any way. Okay? Love y'all. Bye.